Hilchah Shechita Perek Shmini. Chseira Ketzat. Now we learned there was the drusa, and then there was the nekuva, and then there was now there's the chseira. That's the third of the treifas, of the 8 treifas. Now in nekuva we said there are 11 ivarim, which if they're nekuva, they're a treifa. And then we also learned that if it's nekuva is treifa, so certainly if it's missing is treifa. But that din that if it's missing as a treifa means the entire aver is missing. That's the Lach Mishnah talks out. But now there's another din that there are 2 ivarim where over there it's missing the whole thing. It's missing the number, the amount that should normally be there. If it's missing the normal number that should normally be there, so it's also a treifa. And that is the rei and the raglayim. That's what he's talking. Chseira kate, such shnei ivarim heim. Shem chaser minyanim. If it's missing from the minyan, from the normal number that would normally be there, is treifa. Ve'eluhein, what are the 2 ivarim? Hareya v'haraglayim. The rei and the raglayim, the lung and the feet, and the hind feet. Talking about the hind feet. The chamish unes yesh l'reya. Now the reya would have, a normal reya has 5 unis. 5 unis is like little lobes. In other words, there's the reya itself, which is the bottom part of the reya, which is the larger part, which is called the of the reya. The of the reya. Masha'en kain, there's also the parts on top, which are little extensions, little lobes that are sticking out of the reya, and there are 5 unis which the reya has. Sheyitla oisam adam biyadeh. You'd hang up, you'd hold up this reya connected your face. You're holding up the reya as you would be looking at the reya when you're looking at the front of the animal. You're looking, if you imagine hanging up the animal in front of you and looking at the animal towards its chest. So you're looking at the animal. There are 3 unes, 3 of these lobes would be on the right side of the reya. No, the reya's right side, not on your right side. It'll be your left side. But looking at the reya would be 3 unes, 3 lobes on the right side of the reya, ushtayim and asmel, and 2 unes on the left side of the reya. So the right side of the reya has 3 unes, and the left side of the reya has 2 unes. And also, besides that's not one thing. And secondly, ubitzad yimin mimena, and on the right side of the reya, is also, there's another oizen ktana. There's also like a little ear, a little lobe sticking out. The eina b'tzad unis, it's not an extension in others together. It wouldn't be like 4 unis, and one would be smaller. It would be in a different space. It would be more towards the front of the reya sticking out. That's this oizen ktana, this little ear, this little lobe. And v'yeshlo k'mei kis b'fnei atzma, and there's also a pouch. V'hi b'techa kis, and this oizen ktana, this additional oizen ktana, as besides the 3 unis, which the reya normally has on its right, there's also another little lobe, a little oizen, and that's in its pouch. The ezen zuak ktana hi anikras varda. It's called a varda, a rose. Mipnei shudei melaver. That's similar to a rose. It's a little rose. It's not part of the minyan. We're saying there's 3 on the right and 2 on the left, but this is another thing. This is the oizen ktana, which is called the varda, lefichach. Since it's not part of the minyan, so therefore wouldn't be going to get of chseira. Lefichach imleinim tzas havarda, even if this varda is missing, is muteres. Shekachi darka. Yesh behemis timotzi bem, yesh behemis le timotzi bem. V'imnim tzas nekuva, but if this varda has a hole in it, there's a hole in the varda, is afal pi shakis shelo seisimas hanekev, even though this hole, this nekev, is covered by the kiss of the varda, and nevertheless, it's not a proper covering. The kiss of the varda is not a proper covering, and therefore arizu treifa. So over here, if it's missing the varda, it's not a problem, because there's certain behemoths that don't have a varda. But on the other hand, if it has a varda, and this varda has a hole, so it comes out that there's a hole in the reya, because the varda is part of the reya, so there's a hole in the reya. If there's a hole in the reya, so memela, that's the neck of kosher, in the reya is a psul. Now that's the seder. The seder is nachamo, so there's 5 unes on the right of the reya, and there's 5 unes on the left, 2 unes on the left of the reya. And there's also a varda on the right of the reya. Now choser minyan unes, if there's missing the number of the unes, that's this din of choser. V'nimtzas achas min asmil, there's only 2 on the left, there's only 1 on the left, I'm sorry. And rather than being 2 on the left, there's only 1 on the left. A shtayim and aymin, instead of being 3 on the right, there's only 2 on the right, is treifa. However, v'im nimtzu shtayim b'yamin v'zeis havarda. So even though normally there's 3 on the yamin plus the varda, and if you don't have the varda, it's also kosher. But lepel is another chidush that if you have 2 on the right plus the varda, so this varda is mashlim, it's kilo, like there's 3 on the right. So it's nachamal. If there's only 1 on the left, it's possible. If you have only 2 on the right, it's also possible. However, if there's a varda as well, so it has a din kilo, there's 3 on the right. And memela, it's kosher. Arizim muteres. Halacha gimel nischalfu homis. Whereas the seder is that on the right there's 3 and on the left there's 2. What happens? Fakir nimtzu shalish min asmel u'shtayim min hayimin. There's only 2 on the right and there's 3 on the left. B'lei veret, and on the 2 on the right don't have a veret. Shahaya veret, or there was a veret, but the veret wasn't on the right. Shahaya veret ima shalish mitzat smel. In other words, normally there's 3 on the right plus a veret and 2 on the left. And over here, fakir, there was 3 on the left plus a vered, and there was 2 on the right. Is arizu treifa? Why is it a treifa? Because there's only 2 on the right, and there should be 3. So if the 2 on the right had a vered as well, so it has a din of 3. Masha'inkin, if there was no vered, or if the vered was mitzad smil, but I'll call on the right, it had 2 and no vered, so memela, that's the chser. That's the chser. The chser is that there's 2 on the right without a, there's only 2 on the right, or there's only 1 on the left. That's called chser. Now, l'chura, we have a rule called yasek kenotel dami. So l'chura, the fact that there's 3 on the left should also be a problem because there's an extra una on the left. So melet's kila, there's only 1 una. So now we're going to learn here, the next halacha, that b'negei unis, you don't always say kol yasek kenotel dami. Halacha daled, nitesu ha'unis b'minyanam. This is azay. Im hoyse ha'oizen ha'yisera b'tzad ha'unis. In other words, it was coming behamshach to the unis. In other words, it was in the same row as the unis. It's in front of the reya, which is towards the heart, is muteris. That's muteris. Why? It's brought down that the seder I say that's a derech. Derech is that sometimes it has mu'unis. On the right there should be 3, and on the left there should be 2, but it could be more than 3, or it could be more than 2. There's as long as it's bitzada unis or umis halef. However, if it was on the back of if there was an extra una, but it was on the back of the reya, shehil umis atzlois, which is going towards the ribs, is harezu treifa. Over here we talk and say shayasek kechasim. That over here, since it has an extra una, so that extra una is as if it's missing an una, and memela so it's hayasek kechasim. It's like hard to understand. You know, the fact that there's an extra una is not a problem. Because if it would be with Sadas Lois or Keneged Aleph, because Darka Bekach. Mashenkim is on the back, then it is a problem. And then the problem goes into the category of Kol Yasek Kenotel Dami. That problem goes into the category of Kol Yasek Kenotel Dami, and therefore it's a problem. So therefore, that's why in Halachi Gimel, for example, when you had 3 on the left, so since those 3 weren't on the back, it was either Sadas Lois or it was on the front. So in Mela, the third doesn't create a problem. The third on the left doesn't create a problem. It's at Kol Yasek Kenotel Dami. Just like the 4th on the right wouldn't create a problem. It's at Yasek Kenotel Dami. That wouldn't create a problem. It only creates a problem als Kol Yasek Kenotel Dami if it's on the back, towards the tzlois. Okay. So in Mela over there, when there was 2 on the right and 3 on the left, so the chsaron was because there's only 2 on the right, and in Mela it's a chasam. Now, in order for this una, this extra una, to have a problem of kol yasek kenotel dami, the size of the extra una is v'hu shetia k'mei ola shel hadas. It has to be the size of the leaf of a hadas. Avol pachas mizeh, if it's less than the leaf of a hadas, ain't a eisen, and that's not called an eisen, and therefore umuteres. That's muteres. So that was the din of chseira. The din of chseira is that there's a minyan ha'unis. The minyan ha'unis is 3 and 2, 3 on the right and 2 on the left. And if it's chaser and minyan owners, that's a problem. Now, look what the next din is not a din of chseira. Oizen shenimtzaz dvuke bechaverta asmuchala. If you have one of the unes, which is connected, it's davuk, it's attached to the una which is next to it. Now, the reason why is it attached? It's attached because there must have been a hole. There must have been a hole, and that caused it that there should be a lecha. And that lecha caused an attachment. A bulapil, since now they're attached, So memela, so that hole is covered up, and since that hole is covered up, so that hole is not a chsarn. So no, that doesn't have a din of a chsarn of an akuva because it's covered up with the una that's next to it, and that's why muteres. However, if the una in the right where it has three unas, if the first una is connected is dovuk to the third una and skipping over the second una, so over there that dveikus is not going to remain. And since that dveikus is not going to remain, so ultimately it will be a chsarn mitzad anukuva, not mitzad chseira. Over here, the chsarn is going to be mitzad anukuva, but in the case where it's dovuk to the una which is next to it, so it will remain dovuk, and there won't be a problem of the nukuva. Masha'inkan over here, when it's dovuk, in other words, it skips one, so then that would be a problem. That's what he's saying. In the right is treifa. Now, nimtzu shteo unis kuna achas. You take a look at the two unis, and they seem like one una. No, they don't look like two unis. Ve'eina niris kishdayim dvukis. Is imhoye b'neim kimei olah hodos. If there was a separation between them, the amount of space that the size of the leaf of a hodos, knows that the una itself is larger than an olah hodos, but the separation was the size of an olah hodos. Bein beikron, right away in the beginning, and those where they're attached to the reya, or bein be'emtzoin, or bein be'seifon. Regardless, if one part there's an una which has a certain length, and one part of that una in its attachment to the other una, they looked like one, but in a certain part of it, the size of a hadas, there seemed to be a separation. Bein beikron, bein be'emtzoin, bein be'seifon. Kidei sheyukar shem shtayim dvukis. Over there, you could see that there are two, and that they're really attached. No, the other parts, they look like mamish one. But there's a part that's not mamish separated. They're connected, but you can see that there are two that are connected. At least the amount of size that's the size of an Allah of a hadas is muteres. However, if it looks mamish like one, and you don't even see that they're connected, even when the size of a hadas is a rezu chseira, that's called a chseira because there's only one. So mainly you need to have, let's say we're talking about on the right. So on the right you need three. So since two of them are connected, so mainly you only have two. Or Alder's on the left, so two are connected, so you only have one. The imlav is arizuch seira, therefore it's treifa. So the concern of having the two connected is those two became one, and since the two became one, so mainly it's a seira. Halacha zayin nimtzas kula shtei arugis ve'ein lo chita chaznayim treifa. Pashas, it means that all the unis are one. In other words, you have just two rows, so you have all the unis together on the right and all the unis together on the left, and you don't see b'chlal any chitu chaznayim. So it's treifa. So l'chur it's a kolshkin madach. We said before that if you have two unis together, it's considered a treifa because it's chaser b'minyan unis. So over here they're all together. So l'chur is a kavad the chaser b'minyan unis. So the Mishnah says that Bishleim over there, when you have the unis, they're separated. Just two of them aren't, so then it's chaser b'minyan unis. But over here, if they're all together, so then there would be a svara that's kachi b'riyasim. The male doesn't go into together of chaser b'minyan unis. I mean, it needs explanation to understand it. But that's what the Mishnah says. That's the chidush. That over here, when there's no unis at all, so it's not a treifa. V'chein im chaser guf hareya. Is afal pishalei nikva harezik mishachaser minyan umes utreifa. Now these words v'cheinem chaser gufareya afal pishalei nikva harezik mishachaser minyan umes utreifa. So there are some that learn that the pshat is they're talking about the whole is missing. The entire main part of the reya is missing. That's pshat. Chaser gufareya afal pishalei nikva. There's no nekev in the reya, but it has the unes. But it doesn't have the gufarei, it doesn't have the And memela is arezik mishachaser minyan is utreifa. Lefichach im nimtzim imenu. The word lefichach is shver a little bit. Lefichach im nimtzim imenu mokim yavish achi yiparach b'tzipein. There's part of this or alderos the una, which has a mokim yavish until it could come down. If you scratch it with your nail, it'll come off. So notice it's in ganzen uis getricken, so it's completely dried out. Is a rezik kechaser utreifa. Vafilo hoya kolshu. Aruch HaShulchan says that the vart is, since part of it is dried out, so it's kila, the whole thing is going to fall apart. Not so clear in the Rambam pshat over here. Because the Mishnah seems to be saying that there's a chiddush over here that chaser gufa reya means it was chaser betchilas briyasa. Before we were learning that if part of the reya is missing, the part of the basra reya is missing, that's not a chsar. As long as the simpenus akayim, we have the ikar is the simpenus. The gufa basra of the reya is not so negeya. So the chura, what's over here? Chaser gufa reya is missing part of the reya. So he says the pshat is there's a difference if it became missing, it's missing mechayim or it's missing another mileda, or it became missing later. If it became missing mileda, so then there's a chsarn. That's also a chsarn of chseira. Masha'inkin, if it was there lechatchila and it just later on it got missing, so that's not a chsarn of chseira. It's not so clear. That's how the Mishnah learns. This is a machlekes here. What's the pshat when the chaser gufer does it mean part of the reya, or does it mean the entire reya? The chayim. Halacha ches. Reya shenimtzas nefucha. K'meikar charoya shel dekel, like the leaves of a palm tree. In other words, this says let's a lulav. With a lulav, we take it out before it spreads out. But if you wouldn't take it off, so it would spread out its leaves. So that is that the reya is already knows the reya. When you blow it up, it's nefucha. But when you take it out and the animal is no longer alive, it's not nefucha. But over here you have a reya that even when the animal is not alive, is ungeblossen. It's nefucha. K'mei ikar charoya shel dekel. Because it's blown up by itself without having to put in air. Is oisen misafik. That's all. Yaseret misafik. Why? Because shizu tesis mishuna begufa. So it's larger than it would normally be. Normally when there's no air, so it comes down. It's like a balloon that's full of air, so that it expands when it loses the air. So it contracts. Over here, it's psatesis mishuna begufa. V'shem hatesis begufa is kichisorim k'mei amru b'minyan. Just like there's a din of kol yeser kenotel dami, so there's a svara that kol yeser in the gufa davar is also kenotel, and the mela. So that's why misafik it's awesome. Misafik it's awesome. Halacha tes. Habehema shepacha daviyara. It went through some traumatic experience. It was afraid. Achetzam kahareya shalo. Its reya became shriveled up. Its lung became shriveled up with a kreva liyas yivesha, and it's close to being dry. So it depends what the pachad came from. Im pachad b'tei shamayim kingen shisham kilram iras azikim kietza b'zem muteres. Chazal had b'kabbalah that if the fear was something that was made b'tei shamayim, it heard thunder, it saw lightning. So even though it had a fear and it shriveled up, but eventually it'll go back. If the fear came in front of it, the shechted a behemoth, so the behemoth got frightened. So then it's arizu kechaseru treifa, because that doesn't revert back to its original status. That's the pashtus advar. Now, ketzed beit kanei, so you open a behemoth, you see that the reya is shriveled up. You don't know if it was b'dei shamayim and it would have gone back, or if it was b'dei adam, it doesn't go back. So how are you beidik the reya? Is mishivan is hareya b'mayim meisles. Now, if it was during the winter, so mishivan is b'mayim peishrim, you put it into lukewarm water, ubikeli she'ena mayim mismatzim migabe v'nezlim, in the keli that the water doesn't distill from it and doesn't go krich out. So memela it remains peishrim. Those vices when the water comes out, so it cools off. So over here we want that the water should remain lukewarm; it shouldn't become cold. In order for it not to become cold quite quickly. So therefore you put it in warm water, in mayim peishrim, in lukewarm water, and in the keli where the water doesn't seep out through the edges, and therefore the water doesn't become cold. However, if it was hot, so then fakert is mishivan esim mayim tzein, you put it in cold water, in a keli where the water does seep out. In other words, we're not talking about seeping out mamish. It's like it becomes wet from the outside. So if in such a situation, the water which is inside the keli will remain cold. So nachamal, if it's in the winter, you put it in warm water in a keli which the water doesn't seep out. It doesn't become wet from the outside. And if it's in the summer, you put it into cold water in a keli where the water does become wet from the outside, and therefore it'll still remain cold. is imchazer l'briyasa, if it returned to its original status, is so that's a raya. Is b'dei shemayim muteres. So it's a raya that the fear was only b'dei shemayim, and mele was a temporary thing. However, if soaking in the water for 24 hours doesn't bring it back to its original state, so then b'dei odami, then we can understand that it was shriveled up because of a fear that it happened b'dei odam, and therefore it's treif. Halacha Yud Aleph. So chseira, we learned before that chseira is there's two evarim, which there's a din of chseira. In the minyan ha'unis, the chamish unis, if it's missing from the minyan ha'unis, and al derech zeh b'negea the raglaim, if it's missing from the raglaim. So here the Rambam continues. Halacha Yud Aleph. Behema shehoisech chseira regel b'chilas briyasa. If it was missing one of the hind legs, regel means the hind leg, b'chilas briyasa treifa. V'cheinem hoisi yisera regel, shekol hayeser kechaseru. Avalum hoyu lo sholish yadayim, the yad achas, the forelegs. So that's muteres. The din of regel is only the hind legs. Lefichach, since it's muter, if it was lechatchila born with one leg, or with three leg. With one foreleg, with one yad. Al derech zeh with three forelegs. Is lefichach nechtach hayad shelo is also muteres. Because just like there's no chsarn if it was born without a foreleg, so al derech zeh there's no chsarn if it was cut off. However, nechtach haregel, if the hind leg was cut off, so it depends. Min harkuva l'mayla treifa. If it was cut off above the knee, so then it's a treifa. However, min harkuva l'mata, if it was cut off below the knee, that's not considered that the regel is not there. If it was cut below the knee, and therefore muteres. Now the behema, the leg is made up of three bones. So there's like a large bone on the bottom, which, by us there's an ankle. By a person there's an ankle, but over there the ankle is much higher. So that would be like the lower akuva. That would be like a lower knee, so to speak. And over there there's bones. There's a bunch of little bones that connect the bottom bone with the middle bone. And then again, there's the middle bone, which is called the sheikh. That's the sheikh. And that's the middle bone. That's the second bone in the animal, going from bottom up, or eldels are from going from top bottom. And then there's the top bone, which connects to the hip. That's the hip. So that's the yerech. So when we're talking about the arkuva, we're talking about the arkuva, which connects the hip, so to speak, the long hip bone, together with the sheikh. So, and that's called the arkuva, nachamol. Min harkuva l'mayla treifa, min harkuva l'mata muteres. Be'ez harkuva amru, ba'arkuva shu seif ha'yerech, ha'samach l'guf. There's the yerech, the hip, which is samach l'guf. The end of that yerech, which is before the sheikh, that's the arkuva. So b'kitzur, if you have an animal that's missing a hind leg, or it has an extra hind leg, that's a treifa. If you have an animal which you cut off the hind leg higher than the knee, in other words, part of the hip bone was already cut off, and the hip bone was cut off, so that means it's missing a leg, and therefore the behemoth is a treif. Halacha Yud Beis, nishbar ha'etzem l'mayla merarkuva. If the bone was broken l'mayla merarkuva, now the question is it considered that it's missing the regel? Is the fact that the bone is broken off, is that considered that the regel is missing, and then it's a chseira? Im yotze kule erubi l'chutz, is a reze k'moshe nechtav v'nafalu treifa. If the bone is broken, it went out of the flesh and out of the skin, and the broken bone is the outside. You could actually see the break on the bone, and so it's as if the bone was already taken off, and therefore it's a treifa. V'im hoya haboser ehoer chayfa reiv ovye v'reiv hekefer shel etzem hanishbar. The bone was broken, but the flesh, or even the oir, was covering most of the circumference and most of the thickness of this broken bone. Is harei zeh muteres. Now you have to understand exactly what's the tzir of the reiv ovye and the reiv hekefer. In other words, you can have a hechatimtza that it's reiv ovye and not reiv hekefer, or reiv hekefer and not reiv ovye, and it has to be reiv ovye and reiv hekefer. And also, is it talking about also? In other words, is this in contrast to Yotze Kulei Rubi L'chutz? So in the Rambam Ha'aruch, Barichos, he talks about the Yotze Rubi Kulei L'chutz means you actually see the break. You actually see the break. But nevertheless, even though you see the break, but you can have a hechatimtza of the flesh still surrounding the broken bone. In other words, it's not like a stira. In other words, it could be im yotze kulei rubi lechutz, harei k'moshe nechtav v'nafel l'teifa. That's number one. Now, however, even though it's yotze kulei lechutz, it's not like the contrast. Despite the fact that Yotze Kula Irubi Lechutz is that is a muteres, but the tzir exactly how the exact tzir is, I don't have clear. Vafilu nafal miktsas ha'etzem. Akolpon, that's the din. The din is that if the bone was broken, and you could see the broken bone on the outside, in other words, if the bone was broken, the bone was broken, and it's still inside the flesh, so then it's not considered nittel. That's for sure. If the bone was broken and the flesh was also opened up, and you should actually see the broken bone, so then that's considered that the bone, the kilo, the leg was separated. That's already, even though it's hanging on there with the flesh, but since the bone was broken, you could actually see the broken bone. So then we assume that it's not going to heal. Masha'inkin, in the case where it's the basar or the air is makif, reiv avye, reiv hakefe, so in such a case it could heal, and therefore it's not considered as if it's removed. Therefore it's not called a chassid. In the tzir where the basar is being makif, reiv hakefe, reiv avye, and even though some of the bone fell off, so notice some of the bone is actually missing, but nevertheless we consider that it's possible for it to still re-heal, and therefore it's not considered that it's chaser a leg. The gidam harakim enam chshuvim kebasar. It says it has to be covered. This broken bone has to be covered with either basar or oir. Now, what about if it's covered with gidam harakim, with sinews? So that is saying gidam harakim enam chshuvim kebasar. Therefore, the fact that this broken bone, the break, is covered with gidam doesn't constitute covered. That's considered uncovered. And therefore, it goes into the category of what he said in the beginning. This needs further verification. Ram Maruch is Mayrich over here to explain the tzir of what's this Rubei, and there's Rubei, Rev Avye, Rev Hakefe. Halacha Yud Gimel. Same as Hagidim. Same as Hagidim literally means where the Gidim get together, the juncture of the Gidim, where the Gidim get together. Same as Hagidim, Him Bebehema Ubechaya, L'mayla min ha'akiv, v'makim shetelin bei hatabachim ha'behema. So there's a place on top of the akiv, on top, the akiv is the ankle, the heel rather, on top of the heel, but it means the top of the halacha yud gimel. Same as Hagidim literally means the juncture of the Gidim, where the Gidim get together. Same as Hagidim, where the Gidim get together. Hein bebehema ubechaya l'mayla min ha'akiv. B'makim shetelun be'atabachim ha'behema. So there's, as we said, there's three bones in the animal's foot. So there's the bottom bone, the leg, the bottom bone, and that goes up until that's called the akiv. And that there's a bone over there that's sticking out that's called the akiv. And on top of that bone, that's where the behemoth usually, after they shep the behemoth, so the behemoth is cut off, the bottom part of the foot is cut off, and that's where they hang up the behemoth. They put a hole in that area, and they hang the behemoth up by that akiv, or right on top of that akiv. There's no chamol. Same as Hagidim, behemoth b'chaya l'mayla min akiv, b'makim in that area shetel be'atabachim ha'behemoth, where the tabachim hang up the behemoth to deal with the behemoth, to do whatever has to be done in the behemoth. So they make a hole in that area, l'maylam and akiv, and that's where they hang up the behemoth. And behein shleisha, now these same as Hagidim and the behemoth are three white gidim, white veins, white sinews. Echad ava, one is thick, and we'll soon see that it's thicker than the other two together. Ushnayim dakim, the other two are thin. Umimakim sheyaschel, behein koshim ulevanim, from that area, which you just said, was the place which is l'maylam and akiv, and over there they're hard and white. When they're going up in this leg, they're going up in the leg and they're still white until they actually start, and they're white and hard until they start becoming soft and red. That's same as Hagidim. So the areas of Nachamol, there's the place Lamailam and Ha'akiv, the place where the atabach normally would make a hole in the animal's leg in order to hang up the animal. That area, which is above the first bone, so to speak, of the animal's foot, of the animal's leg, is that's where the Tzemus Hagidim begin. So there's 3 veins, and one is thick, and the other 2 are thin, and they're white and they're hard, and they go up in the leg. They go up in the leg until they no longer are white, no longer are hard, and that's where the Tzemus Hagidim end. How long is that? It's 16 finger breaths, 16 etzbois. That's been a behemoth. There are 3 of them. And on Eif, there's Shisha Gidim. And where do they begin? So a kosher Eif has an etzba yisera. So on the bottom of this etzba yisera, there's a psan etzem, and it begins by this etzba yisera ad sefer regel until it goes up the leg. Shu osi kaskasim kaskasim. The top of the leg has scales by a Eif. So the male has scales. So these same sagidim go up from the etzba yisera until sefer regel, which is kaskasim kaskasim. Magen Mishnah brings that this was the Mishnah Yishen of the Ram. Well, the Mishnah Achrein of the Ram was that by an Eif, it's also the same place where an Eif, where it would be by Behema, Kenegdei would be by Eif. In other words, it doesn't start from the Etzba, the Etzba Yisera, and goes up until Mokim HaKaskasim. It goes up Be'erech in the same way, like from a Behema. It's just like you have to shire in a Behema after the Akiv. So there's no Akiv by an Eif. But al derech zeh, the shlisha elyon, the lower part of the oif, that's where there's no tzemus hagidim. And then the oif also starts the same place where it starts in the behema. Yeah. So in other words, there's in an oif there's also the lower bone and the higher bone. So just like in a behema, there's no akiv over there, but just like in a behema, there's the lower bone, and then there's the akiv, and then there's the higher bone. So al derech zeh, by oif, after you finish the first bone of the leg, so then the higher bone, that when this higher bone starts beginning, that's where the Tzemus Hagidim begins. That's what the Magen Mishnah writes. That's what Peil Mamish Halacha. This is the Ram was Chezer in the Tshuva. There's Nachamos. So there's a musik called Tzemus Hagidim. There's Tzemus Hagidim in a behema. There's Tzemus Hagidim in a oif. Tzemus Hagidim in a behema is 3 gidim. Tzemus Hagidim in an oif is 16 gidim. And the Ram tells you, where's the Tzemus Hagidim in a behema? Tzemus Hagidim in a behema starts from the Lamailam and Akiv, the place with Telem Be'atabachim, and it goes up for 16 etzbois. And by first the Ram over here writes that there's 16, and they start from the etzim of the etzba, and it goes up until the Maila by the Kaskasim. We're saying that the Ram the Tshuva writes he was Chazer, and he says by etzba it also goes up. In other words, it starts from after the first bone of the leg. And it goes up also be'erech. It doesn't go up all the way till the top. It goes up also be'erech, not 16 etzbois, but this is in a ratio to what by a behema. Halacha tezvav. Behema shenechtechu ragla b'mkeim tzemes adigim. So now there's a new din. A behema that the leg was cut b'mkeim tzemes agidim is also treif. So before we learned that if a leg was cut l'maylam in our kuvitz treif. Mashenk and lamatim in our kuvitz ksheira, because it's not a ksheira. Now we're learning a new din that if a leg was cut b'mkeim tzemes agidim, it's also a treif. Now the question is l'chura, if a leg was cut lamatim in our kuva, so obviously the whole tzemes agidim is going to be missing. So how could a leg which was cut lamatim in our kuva, which is memela going to cause that the whole tzemes agidim is going to be missing, be kosher? And if it was cut in the tzemes hagidim, then it's treif. But the tame v'tema kei tzatichotech l'maylam tzemes hagidim v'himuteres. Ad shetichotech l'maylam arkuvel yenekiv meishabiyan. Because when is a leg considered a chseira? Only when it was cut l'maylam arkuv. If it was cut l'matim arkuv, even though it was l'maylam tzemes hagidim, so it's kosher. V'im nechtach lamatim b'tzemis hagidin or b'tzemis hagidin is asura. So the answer is uslchuritz akasha. So the answer is no. Shebetreifes tichotech mikan v'tichya umikan v'toms. V'linesra behem azum pnei sheichatuchas regel memakom zeh. There's the chsarn of when you cut from tzemis hagidim, it's not because it's a chaser. El mepnei shenechtuch hagidim. Shechati chaser miklal atreifes k'mei sheizbor. So, and we're going to learn also the hamshech that even lemashal you cut the tzemis hagidim and you didn't cut off the regel. You only cut the tzemis hagidim. When you cut it doesn't mean when you cut it. If you cut off the regel in the tzemis hagidim, so obviously you cut the tzemis hagidim. But the Rambam is going to say that if you cut the tzemis hagidim, even though the whole regel remained, but the problem was you cut the tzemis hagidim. So b'meila, it's another problem. So it's a problem. I mean, the Rambam is saying two tirutzim. You're asking a kasha. The chsarn over here is not because we're missing the tzemis hagidim. The chsarn is because the tzemis hagidim were cut. And it's brought down Magad Mishnah that the tsar of cutting the tzemis hagidim causes the behemoth to die. But I'll call upon him. That's the din. The din is azoid. If the behemoth is missing the hind leg, missing a hind leg from Mitchilas Briyasa, it's treifa. If you cut off the hind leg, l'mayla min harkuva hel yena, which means in the hip before it came to the knee. So then the behemoth is a treifa. Why is it a treifa? Because it's a chesera. Then there's another. If you cut it off under the knee, even though you cut off the whole tzemis hagidim, is not a problem. If you cut into the tzemis hagidim, also causes it to be a treifa. That's another treifa. Halacha tezayin. Now the next treifa there was again. So we had the drusa, and then we had the nekuva, and then we had the chseira. That was the chseira. Now we have the netula. The netula. There was the netula. That was the fourth. So netula ketzad. What does it mean netula? Shleishe ivarim heim shem nitlu treifa. If those ivarim were taken, it's treifa. The fact that these ivarim were originally missing, that's not the problem. Or there's missing of it. The problem is that they were taken. Same as hagidim. So the same as hagidim, the problem of same as hagidim, of cutting the same as hagidim, is a din in netula, and v'hakovit. Hakovit is the liver, and v'lechi elyon, the upper jaw. So in these three, there's a din called netula. Ukfar bi'anu, shabehema shenechtach ragla, v'cheino eif, b'mkeim tzemes hagidim, is leinasu treifa elim mepnei shenechtach hagidim. It's not a chsarn because it's a chseira. The chseira means that it's missing something. Over here, the chsarn is not because it was missing something, because you could have a mitzvah that it was missing the same as hagidim, and still it's kosher as long as it wasn't nechtach the same as hagidim. Over here, the problem elim mepnei shenechtach hagidim. Lefichach im nechtach hagidim levadam v'aregel kayamis is also treifa. Shari nitla tzemis hagidim. Over here doesn't mean really it was taken away. It means it was taken away in the sense that once you cut it, it's considered nitla. So if you cut the tzemis hagidim, that's called nitla. That's netula. So it's a different chsarn. So the chsarn before that we learned about cutting the tzemis hagidim is a chsarn of netula. So that's one of the things that if it's netula is a treif. Now nechtach bebehema ha'echad ha'ava levade. If in the behema was cut only one, as we said in the behema, there's three gidim in the same as hagidim. One that's thick and the other two which are thinner. Now, if only the thick one was cut, is muteris. Shari nishur shnaim. There's two gidim that are nishur. So the fact that one of them was cut, the other was cut, is garnished. Nechtucha shnayim adakim. The other two thin ones were cut, is also muteris. Sharei ha'echad ha'ava gadol mishnayim. So therefore, it's not considered reif. Since the larger gid is larger than the two gidim together, so therefore that's considered that it was nital. It was cut. It wasn't kolat semis elamiyuta. However, if the rave of each of these gidim were cut, there was an incision into each gid. Rave of the gid is treifa. A nitlu kulam. So if nechtuchu kulam or nitlu kulam or all of them were taken away, I'm not sure the chiluk between nechtuchu and nitlu. If nechtuchu kulam and nitlu kulam, so in all these cases, so there's the din that that's considered a the psul of nitlu tzemes hagid, or nechtach tzemes hagid. Ube'ev, that's been a behema. Ube'ev, afilu nechtach rube shel echad min hashisha aser streif. But if it's different, in other words, by a behema, even if even the two were cut, but since they're the two thin ones, so therefore, and the larger one is larger than the two together, so therefore it's not considered nechtach rube. Hashem ba'oif, it's more chamur. By oif, if it was nechtach, even the roiv of one of the gidim of these sheish esrei gidim, so memela it's a treif. Va'oif shenishtabru agapav, an oif that its wings were broken is also is mutter. We said the chsaron of chsera is only by the raglayim, the hind legs, not the forelegs. So the wings of a oif is similar to the yadayim of a behema. And it's in Alter Rebbe brings in Tanya that the wings of a oif is similar to the yadayim of the behema. And Memela, just like if nechtach yadayim of a behema, it's not a treifa. So who adin nishtabru agapav is also not a treifa. Halacha chafalef kavit shnit lekula treifa. The entire liver was taken as treifa. Im nishtayim mimenu kazayis b'mokim sheitluya bei. The place where it's attached to the animal normally is hanging in it, which is near the kidneys. Ukazayis b'mkei mora, and there's also a kazayis b'mkei mora, and even though the rest of it was taken, so it's only left two kazayis and one kazayis in the mokim sheitluya bei near the kidneys, and one kazayis next to the gallbladder, b'mkei mora, is hareza muteres. Now, nidaldu lahakavit, if the kavit is like shaken up, in other words, it's not mamish firmly attached, vaharehi mu'ure b'tarpe shalo, in other words, and it's connected to the diaphragm. The diaphragm is the mechitza between the upper part of the body, which is the Evrei Haneshima, and the lower part of the body, which are more the Evrei Ho'ikul. So this kavit is now like hanging loosely on the tarpish shalo. Abelepel is there muteres. Nitel mimenu mokim sheitluya be umokim amora. So in other words, if the part, in other words, even though you have the whole kavit there, but the place where it's connected to the near the kidneys over there, that area was taken. There's nothing there, and also or the place where it's next to the mora, next to the gallbladder, is afal pi shashar kaim k'mishahu treifa. Whereas the main thing is that the kavit has to have the kazayas next to the mora and a kazayas next to mokim shitluya bay. If everything else is missing, it's not a problem. And if everything else is there and they're not there, so it is a problem. And then it's a treif. Now, nisha bakazayis b'mkei mora ub'mkei shitluya bay kshera. That's what he said really before. That's if there's an entire kazayas in that place. No, it wasn't like a kazayas in one place. It was pieces. It wasn't like a kazayas in one place. It was flattened. And it's although there is, if you scrape it off, so to speak, there'll be a kazayas, but it's not like a kazayas, a chunk of a kazayas. It was long like a ritzua, but again, it wasn't like a normal type of a kazayas. In other words, if you have a kazayas, a normal piece of a kazayas of the kavit, that's beseder. But over here, there was like a long strip, and that strip could be starved to a kazayas. A lapel, it's not a normal type of structure of the way the kavit is structured. Is harezu safik and viroli shiasur. That's not a kavit. Whereas a kavit has to be a piece of a kavit, a normal piece of a kavit. The size, the fach is the size of a kazayas. Side b'mkeim hamora, and side b'machim sheitluya. That's the. So that's kavit. So kavit is also something which is a natula. If the kavit is natula, so it would be a treifa. So that's a natula of a kavit. Now we learned the third thing, the third aver, that there's a din of natula is the lechi elyon, which is a chiddush of the Rambam. It's not mefurish in Gemara. Nechel elyon shenitel is treifa. If the lechi elyon of the upper jaw was taken as a treifa, it's brought down that because if the upper jaw is missing, so cold air comes in, and that cold air will come in, and that'll cause him to die. Because he has to have the upper jaw to protect the throat, to be able not to have air coming into the throat. Lechi elyon shenitel treifa. Avalim nitel atachten, if the lower jaw was taken, kigein shenigmam, it was like chiseled away at. It was like it fell apart. It was not talking about it was it fell apart. The part of the lower jaw fell apart. Ad became a simonim. In those, the mice is the simonim, the kana and the vesha, they're attached to the throat, and they're attached like to the lower jaw. So if you'll take away the lower jaw, and that'll cause that the simonim will be nekar, so there'll be another problem of nekru. And if they were nekar, so there would also be a treif. Masha'inkein, over here we're talking about that the part where it's connected to the throat, that part, the lower jaw didn't have it wasn't nekra. That's what he's saying. Avalim nitl atach, the lower jaw was taken. Kigain shen nigmam, that the lower jaw was like taken away, the flesh was taken away. Ad became asimonim, until even the bone of the lower jaw was taken away. Ad became asimonim. Obavale nekru, the simonim weren't nekr, they're still attached to the throat, and somehow or another to that end of the lower jaw is harezu muteres. So you need enough of the lower jaw to help to make sure that the simonim weren't nekru, but the actual lower jaw itself is not liikuva, and even though they were taken away, nevertheless the behema is kosher. Halacha chavdalut kol aver shenamar be shem hoye chaser treifa. So if you have a behema which is chaser treifa, knows an aver which is chseres treifa, is kacham nitl treifa. So the fact that it's nitl is not going to make it better. Knows just like the regel, we said the regel, if the regel is chseres treifa, if it was born only with one regel, so it's a treifa. So al derech if you took away the regel, it's also a treifa. Aval aver shenamar be nitl treifa. Those Ivarim that we just said, the three Ivarim that we said, Nital is Treifa, the Neged, same as Hagidim, and Beneged the Kaved, and Beneged the Lechi Elyon, is Einen Aseres Elim Nechtach Esei Ever. Aval Nivras Chseire Esei Ever, but however, if it was born that way, missing that Ever, it was never Nital, it was Chseire, is that Ezim Muteres. Shemuli Tamer came, is Nimtzas, Chseire Vanatula Achas. Why are you separating? There's one treifa called chseira, one treifa called netula. If the netula, if those treifas, those things that are treifals netula, would also be treifa of the chseira, so why don't we put them into the category of chseira? So therefore, that's a raya. The fact that we're considering it two treifas is a raya that the treifa of netula is not only a treifa of netula. However, if the eva, which it says, if you take it away, is muteres, is kalvachem and chosim it kills briyos v'lei is also muteres. So Mamela it comes out. So a behema which was nitl, and those all those what we said before benegeh chseira, we said only benegeh the unis, and we said it benegeh the raglai. Benegeh the tula, we said about same as hagidim, and al derech benegeh the kovid, and al derech benegeh lechel elyon. So the Rambam is saying that these things are only chsarn by natula, but not if it was created chseira, but not if it was chseira, created chseira. So the mela comes out that if you have a behema that was created without a covet, somehow or another was born without a covet, it would be muteres. That's what comes out here. That it was nitla covet is a chsarn. It was nitla same as agid chsarn, or nitla the nitla lechayel is a chsarn. But if it was nivra without a lechi elgin, without a covet, without a same as agidin, would be the same. Halacha chafei behema shenitlo ha'im shala v'hu beis harechem, that the uterus was taken out. Shenitlo ha'klois, the kidneys were taken out. That is a muteres lefichach. Im nivras bekul ya'achas, with only one kidney, a b'shalish klois, or three kidneys, which l'chura has a din of one kidney because kol yeser kanatul dami muteres. The chenem nikva hakulya is also muteres. There's no chsarn of nitla hakloyos. Now the Rambam starts off nitla hakloyos, and the Rambam finishes off in nivra b'kulya achas. He doesn't say if it was nivra without kloyos, because l'chura, bigashmis, for behema can't live without kloyos. L'chura needs a kidney. One kidney it could live with. L'chura, I'm saying I'll be medicine, I'll be pashtus. But masha'inkin, if it's missing both kloyos, l'chura, it's hard to understand how could it live. But lepel the Rambam brings here from the Bartanur and Chulin that says huadin if it's missing both kloyos. The Ma'aseh the Rambam doesn't say it. The Rambam says it was nivra b'kul yachas, or it had three kloyos. Halacha chavav aval pi shakul yishenitla ichseir muteres im nimtzas ktana b'yeser. If it was found very small, What does it mean very small? Vaktana bedaka, and a behemoth daka small means at kepul. It was the size of a bean. Ubigasa at keinef, and it was the size. It wasn't larger than a grape. So if it wasn't larger than a pull, or if it wasn't larger than a grape, it's treifa. V'chein loksa kulya, and that's a chidush. That even though if it's missing, it's not a treifa. But on the other hand, if it's very small, it is a treifa. V'chein loksa kulya, v'hu sheyasa psarik psara mes shehivish achriyam, that the flesh started to decompose, it started to rot. It reached a point where if you can hold part of it, the rest of it will like fall off. There's no, they're not together. It's all like rotten flesh. The fats inside the kulya. So this illness reached the levin shebetecha kulya. The entire kulya has this illness. This type of, that's what the flesh of the kulya is, of this kidney is arezu trefa. You found water that's cloudy, or water that has a bad odor, is arezu treifa. So in other words, these things, even though if you'd be missing the kulya, it wouldn't be a problem. But if you have these problems, if the kulya is either very small, or the kulya, the flesh of the kulya has decayed, or they have the lecha shrucha, or the mayim achurim or shruchim, so then harezu treifa. Avalim nimtza b'mayim zakim. If you have clear water in the kulya, so then is harezu muteres. Comes out muteres.